All right, so you know how there are certain phrases that should immediately make you suspicious? Like, when someone says, "trust me," you probably shouldn't trust them. When your uncle says he's temporarily borrowing your Netflix password, that password is gone forever. Or when a guy who bankrupted a casino promises to run the economy like a business, well, you're watching 72,000 manufacturing jobs disappear while he calls it a boom. So here's what we're looking at. On February 5th, Senator Raphael Warnock questioned Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent during a Senate Banking Committee hearing about Trump's promised manufacturing boom. You know, the one Trump guaranteed would usher in a golden age for American workers. Bessent, the hedge fund billionaire who made his fortune at Soros Fund Management before founding his own firm, tried to insist we're at the beginning of this boom despite every piece of data screaming the opposite. As usual, let's watch this, and I will give you my take later at the end.
Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Chair Scott, and welcome, Secretary Bessent. President Trump promised that his administration would usher in a, quote, golden age of American manufacturing. In September 2024, at a rally in my home state of Georgia, Donald Trump said, quote, "We're going to have a manufacturing boom." Secretary Bessent, we're now more than 1 year into the Trump administration. Yes or no? Has there been a manufacturing boom in the United States?
There are the beginnings of a manufacturing boom. We have intentions, factory groundbreakings, sir.
So your answer to that is yes, there's been a manufacturing boom?
That we are at the beginning of a manufacturing boom.
Okay, you and I could agree to disagree. But more importantly, manufacturers are telling us something different. Manufacturers are struggling because of the president's policies, and that's what they keep telling us, and the facts keep telling us. In fact, just this past Monday, the Wall Street Journal published this article entitled, "U.S. Manufacturing is in Retreat, and Trump's tariffs aren't helping." I request consent to enter this article into the hearing record. Mr. Chairman?
Without objection.
Secretary Bessent, do you know how many manufacturing jobs the United States has lost since Liberation Day in April 2025, when the president first announced his tariffs?
Yes, Senator, because you were out of the room, but it was already brought up.
We do many things, sir. I don't need you to tell me where I was.
72,000, and I will point out that the Wall Street Journal
72,000
is not called the Main Street Journal, and they care more about
I'm not asking you to opine on the Wall Street Journal. I have 3 minutes. Just answer the questions that I'm actually asking you. So 72,000 manufacturing jobs, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Thank you for answering the question. Manufacturers shed workers in each of the 8 months after President Trump unveiled his tariffs on what he called Liberation Day. I would submit that it's a strange liberation and a curious freedom that leaves you unemployed. Even worse, smaller businesses are struggling to keep up with the tariff chaos. Big manufacturers may have the resources to shift suppliers. And I need you to understand the spirit of my questions. I spend a lot of time talking to the people in Georgia who've given me the great honor of representing them in the United States Senate. And so this is about them, and especially our small businesses. They don't have the ear of the president. They don't have access to Mar-a-Lago, and so they're not able to insulate their company from the worst of the tariff. Secretary Bessent, small businesses without the same resources or unfettered access to the president, what should those businesses do for the relief if they can't get into Mar-a-Lago?
Again, sir, small business confidence is up, and we are seeing that the one big beautiful bill gives the full expensing for equipment, factories, and ag structures.
They are telling us that it's more expensive to make basic things. We are moving in the wrong direction. The facts don't lie. The president lies often. But the facts don't lie. In fact, if you're saying we're at the beginning, basically your answer to those small businesses is wait a little while. Is that the answer? That a year from
you ask about manufacturing.
That's right.
So
I'm asking you.
I am saying.
I'm asking you about this manufacturing boom. Will we see something different a year from now?
We are going to see it. I was just in my home state, Senator Scott's state, South Carolina, that we are seeing a boom there. And I believe Georgia has very good pro-business policies. I'm sure you will see a boom there also. The factory build intentions are quite high.
I'll tell you what I see. I see, as I talk to folks, that it's more expensive to build things in America. I see that we've lost 72,000 jobs a year into this administration. We've lost manufacturing jobs every month since he called for Liberation Day. And meanwhile, folks who are working in these small businesses trying to make their lives work, they're seeing higher costs. They're seeing their costs go up for groceries. They're seeing their costs go up for electricity. They're seeing their costs go up for health care. And I think the American people are still waiting for a solution. So far, we haven't seen one coming out of this Trump tariffs regime. The Baptist preacher is done, and I have no time left. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Inflation.
Senator Ricketts.
What you just witnessed is a masterclass in gaslighting dressed up as economic policy. And I want to add some information you don't have that makes this exchange even more infuriating than it already appears. First, let's talk about what happened on Liberation Day. On April 2nd, 2025, Trump declared a national emergency over the U.S. trade deficit and invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose a baseline 10% tariff on nearly all countries, with higher reciprocal tariffs on about 60 major trading partners. He called this one of the most important days in American history and promised it would boost domestic production and create American jobs. The announcement immediately triggered what multiple sources described as a global market crash. According to Reuters market coverage, the Nasdaq fell 5.97% on April 3rd. Trump had to pause the higher tariffs within a week because markets were in freefall. Now here's what Bessent conveniently left out when Senator Warnock asked him about manufacturing jobs. The U.S. has lost 72,000 manufacturing jobs from April 2025, when Trump announced these tariffs through December 2025. But it gets worse. According to the Center for American Progress, manufacturing employment has declined every single month since Liberation Day. The Washington Post reported that U.S. factories employ 12.7 million people today, 72,000 fewer than when Trump made his Rose Garden announcement, and noted that the trade measures that the president said would spur manufacturing have instead hampered it, according to most mainstream economists. The Yale Budget Lab estimates these tariff policies cost each household $1,800 on average in 2025, with apparel prices rising 28% and food prices climbing about 2% due to tariffs alone. And when Bessent tried to dismiss the Wall Street Journal, saying it's not called the Main Street Journal, and claiming they care more about Wall Street than Main Street, he was trying to distract from a brutal reality. That February 3rd, 2026 Wall Street Journal article Warnock referenced literally said, "The manufacturing boom President Trump promised would usher in a golden age for America is going in reverse." The journal reported that manufacturing employment has fallen below pre-pandemic levels. This isn't some progressive think tank making these claims. This is the Wall Street Journal, which is about as friendly to conservative economic policy as you can get. Here's the mechanism you need to understand. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods paid by U.S. companies when they bring products into the country. Those companies then pass those costs on to consumers through higher prices. But for manufacturers who rely on imported parts, steel, aluminum, computer chips, whatever, those tariffs make it more expensive to produce goods here. So instead of bringing manufacturing back, the tariffs are actually making it harder for American manufacturers to compete. According to CBS News, John Deere cited tariffs when announcing it had racked up roughly $300 million in tariff-related costs and laid off more than 200 workers at plants in Illinois and Iowa. Automakers pointed to tariffs when announcing nearly 5,000 job cuts in July. This is the exact opposite of what Trump promised would happen. And here's the hypocrisy receipt I want you to see. According to CSIS, Trump claimed his tariffs would raise about $600 billion a year, roughly $6 trillion over a decade. But their modeling found the tariffs would only bring in about $330 billion in annual revenue while reducing U.S. GDP by roughly 1%, equivalent to roughly $300 billion in annual output loss. So we're losing more in economic output than we're gaining in revenue. We're making people poorer while claiming to make them richer. That's not a strategy. That's a con. So what does this actually mean for you? Let's start with the personal impact. If you're trying to build a life, buy a house, start a business, those tariffs are costing your household an extra $1,800 a year, according to Yale researchers. That's groceries that cost more, clothes that cost more than pre-tariff trends. Household goods, up 5%. It's like if your landlord raised your rent by $150 a month and then told you to be grateful because he's creating jobs in the building, except he's not creating jobs. He's laying off the maintenance staff. And if you work in manufacturing or know someone who does, those 72,000 lost jobs aren't abstract numbers. They're people who were promised a boom and got unemployment instead. But the institutional impact is even more disturbing. According to the U.S. Court of International Trade, the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, and Supreme Court filings, federal courts have challenged the legal authority behind these tariffs while the policy remains in effect during appeals. When the administration promised manufacturing would roar back and instead 72,000 jobs disappeared, international investors don't just see failed policy, they see institutional dysfunction. Countries hold U.S. Treasury securities based on confidence that America makes rational economic decisions. This undermines that confidence. And for what? Not to create jobs we've established, they're doing the opposite. Not to raise revenue, we're losing more in GDP than we're gaining in tariff income. So, what's this actually for? Bessent wants you to believe it's about bringing manufacturing back, creating a boom, protecting American workers. But here's the thing about Scott Bessent. He's a hedge fund billionaire worth hundreds of millions of dollars who made his fortune managing money at Soros Fund Management and his own firm, Key Square Capital Management. He doesn't need manufacturing jobs to come back. He got rich betting on currencies and bonds. The people who need those 72,000 jobs, they're the ones Senator Warnock was talking about, the small business owners in Georgia who don't have the ear of the president, don't have access to Mar-a-Lago, can't insulate their companies from the worst of the tariffs. They're the ones paying the price for this failed experiment. According to Moody's Analytics, chief economist Mark Zandi and other economists cited in reporting, tariffs have contributed to a weaker job market and slower growth. These aren't partisan hacks. These are economists looking at the data and telling you what's actually happening. Here's where things stand now. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2025 marked the weakest job growth outside of a recession since 2003, with only 584,000 jobs added for the full year, compared to more than 2 million in 2024. Of those jobs, 85% were added before Liberation Day, meaning the tariffs essentially stopped job creation dead in its tracks. Manufacturing lost 72,000 jobs from April to December, while Trump was claiming to create a manufacturing boom. Consumer confidence in January 2026 fell to its lowest level since 2014. The Supreme Court is still considering whether these tariffs are even legal, but they remain in effect while people lose their jobs. This isn't about whether tariffs are good or bad policy in theory. This is about whether you're going to believe a hedge fund billionaire telling you there's a boom, or the 72,000 people who lost their jobs, the manufacturers shedding workers every month for 8 straight months, the Federal Reserve data, the Wall Street Journal reporting, the Yale researchers documenting the costs, and every credible economist saying this is going exactly as badly as predicted. What this reveals isn't just failed economic policy, it's a willingness to look Americans in the eye and tell them the opposite of what they're experiencing is true. To call job losses a boom, to call liberation unemployment, to promise a golden age while delivering a recession. The darker reality is this. When you lose 72,000 manufacturing jobs in 8 months and call it the beginning of a boom, you're not confused about the definition of the word boom. You're hoping the American people are confused enough not to notice. Remember when I said you shouldn't trust someone who starts a sentence with "trust me"? Same principle applies to someone who looks at 72,000 lost jobs and calls it progress. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like this video and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think. Share this with friends or family so more people can understand what's really going on. Don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe so you never miss new videos and updates. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.